So we came out, there were a couple other couples there while we were looking at it, and we put in a bid and didn't think it would be possible that we'd ever get it. Hi, I'm Joy Von Handorf. My husband and I and our kids have been living on Wetherbrooke Farm for the last almost 18 years. We bought the property back in November of 2004, and our daughter Kate was about 4 years old when we moved in, and Wade wasn't born yet, but he came shortly thereafter in 2006. We bought the land from Drew and Judy Gilliland, who had been on the farm for many years. Drew's great-grandfather had bought the farm probably back in the early 1900s. Before that, the Haynes family had owned the land, and they date back, I believe, into the early 1800s. When we bought the place, the Gillilands had been here for many years. The great-grandfather had started building the house and built the bank barns and built a couple other of the barns, and then just over the years passed it down to children, relatives. So it basically stayed in the Gilliland family for well over 100 years before we were able to purchase it. The land used to be multiple hundred acres, I believe, at least 200 acres, 150 acres on this side of Haynes Road. And we were fortunate enough to buy the 15-acre parcel with the land, with the house and the barns. Later, probably 10 years after that purchase, we were able to purchase the 8 acres to the south of us, which was an 8-acre parcel. So the Wetherbrooke Farm at this point, the old Gilliland place now, is up to 23 acres. Wetherbrooke Farm straddles 2 counties. Right now we have 5 acres in Greene County and also 18 acres in Warren County. The property line literally runs right through our front yard. We have a driveway in both counties. I think we have 2 barns in Greene County and I think 7 outbuildings in Warren County, and then our house does sit on the Warren County side of the property line. We bought the property in 2004, and the house that we found out by the previous owners, he thought was built in 1912. The first barn on the property was built 2 years before the house in 1910. It's the white barn that sits almost directly behind the house. The story behind that was that when they built it, it was so tall and nothing else was around it that the wind would catch it and almost blow the barn off of its footing. So they cut it down about 2 feet and dropped the barn down, and it's been that way ever since. So that was the first barn. The bank barn was built in 1918, we believe, which sits sort of directly in the middle of the property and with the grass hill, and it sits up about 45 to 50 feet tall. The back part of it we think was built in 1938. The addition to the back of the bank barn, which has an overhang, about a 50-foot long roof line along the back that we park tractors and hay wagons and things under. You could still see the hand-hewn logs with the wooden pegs that they put together in the barn. We've had to do some repairs, and we've had to do some construction and some tear down, some unsafe things that were in the loft at one point. But the structure itself still has all the same, markings of the hand-hewn lumber, as well as the rocks that lay under the bank barn hill are Centerville limestone. And you can see those inside the tack room under the wall. You can see all the stones that are laid there. There's a concrete wall that runs the length of the old part of the bank barn, which I'm sure was hand poured. It's about 1.5 feet thick, and it holds up the whole south side of the bank barn. All the wood in the upstairs of the hayloft is completely original. We did lay a basketball court floor on top of it, but all the original wood is still underneath it. Being horse people, I don't like messy, and so we cut out some trapdoors upstairs so that we can raise the trapdoors up and slide the flakes of hay above the horse's head and into their stalls without having to have the mess and the labor of moving the hay downstairs. The church pew in the tack room has an interesting story as well. My husband Jeff we both grew up in Bellbrook, and he went to St. Francis of Assisi Church. One year, St. Francis was going through and selling off their church pews. We went one day and took a trailer and ended up buying, I think it's probably about 20 feet long church pew. Weighs a ton. It took several people to get it in, but we got it in the tack room and sort of built the walls sort of around the tack room so that we could have that really cool bench, church pew in there. And we do a lot of meetings in the tack room, so we have a lot of people can sit down. We've done kinds of like learning symposiums and clinics and things like that, where the kids can come and sit, and the grain rep can talk about feed, or the vet comes in and does a little demonstration. You know, we have lots of room for people to sit, and it's kind of a fun history. Just this past year, I was able to find somebody who was nice and crazy enough to be able to build some scaffolding and get up on a ladder 30 feet high on top of scaffolding to paint this bank barn. And so while he was here, I had him paint the bank barn, the first barn on the property. We call it the sawdust barn, the white barn. He painted a couple other buildings as well. And so it took him about, I think only about 2 full days, and he had the whole bank barn completely painted, and it looks great. It still has its old charm, but it looks so much nicer being sort of all one color. And now we know somebody who's willing to come out and paint it for us. I don't know if he'll come back another time, but he came out this time, so that's what matters. So back in 2004, we had sort of found a house of our dreams over in Xenia on 380, and we decided that was the house we wanted. Well, after bidding on it and them turning us down, and Jeff said, no more, we're not going to give them any more offers, that's it. So I got home and I opened my mailbox, and in my mailbox was a flyer from Country Time land dealers about this property for sale. We called that day, and the guy said that their contract had just fallen through and that we could come out and look at it. So we came out. There were a couple other couples there while we were looking at it, and we put in a bid and didn't think it would be possible that we'd ever get it. And the next day I was at a horse show, and Jeff called and said, well, we have a farm. So we got this farm for basically what the land was worth. The house was structurally sound, everything was structurally sound, but just very, very dirty, not very well cared for. They had stapled the carpet to the floor, the original wood floors. So I remember Kate was 4, and we had a couple friends over helping us. So we put the little kids on the floor with a screwdriver and pliers and a jar, and they just picked out thousands and thousands of staples. We lived for several months under plastic in somebody's room because we were doing so much plaster work. So I guess it was 2019, 2020 winter. We took the porch, our outside wraparound porch, and made it part of the house. And so we got a really nice dining room out of it. And we ended up getting a half bathroom and ended up with a lot more open space, more light. And so it was perfect. We're sitting right now in the South Barn, for lack of a better name. We have a North Barn, South Barn, and this is the South Barn. When we bought the property, it was a giant mess. My husband wanted to just light a match and burn it to the ground. So I kept him from it, and the main reason that that I loved it was I love that in the peak of the barn walls there are little cute doors on the top. In the, I don't know what you call, I guess just in the peak of the west and east side. The ceiling had sunk in, the metal roof had drooped to the point where it was almost like a V shape in the middle. When we first moved in, there was a front part and a back part of the barn. There's a concrete footer that runs east and west along the floor where the old barn kind of attached to the new part. And we ended up with 5 stalls in this barn, and a really nice tack room with a viewing window that overlooks our outdoor arena. We can come in the winter, the girls that board in here, or the lesson students can go in, and we've got a little heater in there. And it turned out to be a really, really cute barn. One of probably my second favorite barn on the whole property. Bank barn, of course, always comes first. So the north barn, when we bought the farm, it was maybe 3-sided, and then the back part was left wood. There's like an annex part of that barn that was rotted and falling apart. The original wood is still there. It's hidden, obviously, from the metal siding on the outside, but on the inside, the walls are still original and had been wood and painted at one point. The back of the north barn is still wood. We just recently painted it so it looks a lot nicer. We've replaced a sliding door that didn't work. And then my husband and I decided he wanted to also burn down the back part of the north barn, the annex, the little addition that's there, because everything about it was awful except for the posts and the metal roof. So instead of lighting a match like he would like to, I talked him into keeping it and turning it into a hay storage stall and also a tack room. And so we've got now 3 really nice tack rooms. Each barn has its own tack room. If there's horses in it, it's got a tack room for its boarders or lesson students or whatever horse is in there, they keep their stuff in those tack rooms. So when we bought the farm, there was a big red wick building on the property. It was the only building that did not have floor-to-ceiling stuff in it when we bought the farm. It's 40 by 60, and it's a fairly decently new construction. We didn't have a need to have a big storage barn like that size. So what they used it for was to store hay wagons, hay equipment, tractors and things. Had a gravel floor with big, like the number 2 gravels. So we had a bobcat come in and we dug the floor up, took all the gravel out and actually created the path that leads from behind the bank barn out to the jump field. That was all arena gravel. And so we just kind of spread it around the farm. And then we took that out down to the clay and brought in sand for the footing. So we got 3 inches of sand throughout the barn and added walls. And then we also walled the sides up 4 feet or so with fence boards so that if you're riding along in the indoor arena, you wouldn't hit your kneecap on a post. But it's really, really good for lesson students who are riding smaller horses, beginners who don't feel comfortable riding outside in our big outdoor arena or out in the open field. So we have come to love it and we use it regularly. Every day it's in use at some point for lessons. So this is what we call the playhouse. When we bought the farm, this was just a chicken coop. My mom had seen this building and decided that she would transform it into sort of a wonderland for her 4-year-old granddaughter for her birthday. So she and my father-in-law, Jeff's dad, worked diligently on building it. It's built of solid oak. Everything is oak. You can see there Danny, Kate's first pony. She had him pretty much right when we moved into the farm. We got to bring Danny home. Kate spent a lot of time out here having sleepovers and playing with her friends and drawing on the chalkboard. One of our family friends, Chris Hodson, and drew all these pictures. You can see Blackie and Stripey as kittens on the bottom there. But Kate spent a lot of time in here with me. My dad had this pedal car, and he must have only been probably 3 or 4 at the oldest when he took the car down the hill behind their house and smashed it into a big tree in the back of their backyard. I'm guessing the car is 70 years old. So I use it and keep it on my patio. It's kind of a nice memento of my dad. I didn't really have a lot of mementos from my dad, so I was really excited to get this one. My husband's an engineer, and years ago he started his own engineering firm called Pretech Group. And so he worked out of our upstairs bedroom for a while until he was able to sort of hire a couple people to help him. So he and his buddy Tom ended up working right behind our house in a little building, and we kind of had it fixed up a little bit on one side. The other side was a dirt floor with holes in it. There was a giant chimney that kind of went up through the ceiling that they used to use to heat the water for their baths. And they would heat the water on one side of the building, and then there was a big hole where a pipe ran through the wall over on the other side, and it would heat the water up on one side and drop the water down into a bathtub on the other, and that's where they would bathe. But by the time that we had bought the farm, the chimney was dangerous. It was about ready to let loose, and it could have torn the whole building off its foundation. So one of the very, very first things we did, especially since when it fell, it would probably fall right on our sidewalk coming from our house and it could kill someone. We went ahead and had that chimney taken out, and I'm sure we kept the bricks. They're probably part of some other project we've done at this point. And then my husband and his business partner had the floors concreted, redone. They put new carpet in. They tore out the wall between the 2 halves of that building. and put in a bathroom. They put in a laundry facility for the barn. I use it now as a barn office. We teach lessons there. We do educational lessons there in the winter if it's too cold to ride. I keep extra tack in there that needs to be in air conditioning or heating depending on the season so it doesn't get mildewy. Old ribbons, articles, magazines, just mostly educational things for the kids. If they want to borrow things, they can take things out. After we moved into the farm, we decided to go ahead and build an outdoor arena. And we didn't want to do it twice. So we wanted to do it once. We wanted to do it well. We wanted to do it right. So Jeff, being an engineer that he is, set out to designing it, along with the United States Dressage Federation handbook. We were able to set up a really, really nicely done outdoor arena, all weather, all purpose. Has about 2 feet of gravel. It's under the base. It's 120 by 225, I believe. And so he designed it. We had Martin Marietta come in and lay the rock down. It took him like 8 or 9 hours. Trucks coming in every 5 minutes. One would dump gravel, one would leave. I've never seen more trucks in my life. But when they were done for that fall, they had kind of let it settle and they thought that they had done a good job. We decided it was still uneven. I walked around on it. I could feel the slope where I wasn't supposed to feel the slope. So we decided to let it sit for the winter. And then in the spring, we were going to either have to haul in clay to finish the corner that was low, or we were going to have to dig a pond. So Jeff decided he'd like to have a pond, which in hindsight was a really great plan. We use it for water source for all kinds of things. So he had the Coons Construction Company, friends of ours from Waynesville, he ended up digging the pond for us as well as build the arena. So they dug the pond, got the clay that we needed, and then finished the arena. That I think it was in the spring that it was completely finished. So when we bought the farm, the garage wasn't really a garage. It was like a storage, just another storage building. It was 3-car garage, or should have been. But the floor to ceiling, once again, it was completely packed. The old owner ended up coming by at some point, probably to pick something up that he'd left. And he told Jeff that in all the years he'd lived at this place, and he'd been here his whole life, he said he'd never seen the floor of the garage and joked that he should have cleaned it up sooner. It was kind of a nice building. So Jeff had closed it in. It had sort of a barn door to it, and he pulled the barn door off and ended up siding it with vinyl siding and putting in like actual garage doors that you can lift and use your remote for. Because of the path that it sort of took to get to this farm, we'd looked at a lot of farms, we'd looked at a lot of different options. We'd looked at land, straight land, we'd looked at all kinds of things. I decided that we should name the farm Winding Way, not so much because the way the farm looked, but more so the path it took to get us here. So Jeff comes home from a business trip one day and he told me Wetherbrooke. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's perfect. I said, where'd you even think of that? And he had just designed a bridge in a neighborhood somewhere in Tennessee named Wetherbrooke. And I think they spelled it a little bit differently, probably the WEATH version. So I kind of changed it a little bit and made it like the snooty British version, Wetherbrooke with the E at the end. And that's kind of how that came to be. We've fallen in love with this place, the old buildings, the land, the trees, all of it. Over the last 17 years, we've poured blood and sweat and tears into trying to restore it and give them new life. They've become much more to us than barns. It's probably strange to say, but we sort of think of them as friends. I guess we feel like we're the keepers of the farm's history, like it's our mission to maintain the farm for the next family who'll live here. And maybe one day they'll do the same.